Ta-da! Live! Yay! How you going, guys? Hope everybody is well. Welcome to RCS Live and Unfiltered on this beautiful, beautiful Thursday evening in the UK. It's been a cracking day, lovely and warm. Summer is here. I'm calling it. Summer is here. So, if you were watching, say hi. Watching live, say hi in the chat. Um, I totally forgot to send the email out to everybody to let them know I'm going live. Anyway, so this is literally just, I guess, see who's there and by notification. So let me just quickly copy the link, stick it into my WhatsApp, and let's see who's around. Let's see who's around. Live now, yay! So tonight we're going to talk about why your content is boring. Now, a little caveat to that is my content, I actually also think is a little bit flat. And we're going to explore kind of the reasons why the things that happen out there in, the big wide world, and stuff gets into your head and stops you from creating content. Or makes you, I guess, stops you from actually sharing the voice that you have, the one that you really, really want to use. And I feel sometimes that we just kind of get a little bit wrapped up in what we think we should be saying rather than what we are actually saying. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit of detail. But before we start, I just want to share with you something that happened to me today. And this is absolutely true. It's real world. This happened, right? I had a call today with a prospective client. And it was actually quite a challenging call because I kind of made her cry. I know it was harsh. It was really harsh. And I've been kind of contemplating that one over the day. And basically, what happened was we've got this amazing, amazing, talented person. I'm going to keep it as vague as possible because I don't think there's any real value in connecting. I guess it'd be very difficult for you to kind of work out who it was anyway. But you never know, right? So this business owner, and basically, long story short, because I could have a very long story because it was a long call. Um, had I asked one question. So basically, been in business for like nearly 10 years, not generating a huge amount of revenue. And I actually felt that her clients were actually taking advantage of her. And so I asked one question. Do you want a business or a hobby? Because you are giving away your time, energy, and money, and your generosity is not being rewarded by your clients. It's not being reflected by your clients. And when I said this, she suddenly started crying. And it was just a realization. I think the realization from her that that's exactly what she'd been doing. And as a result, was out of alignment. This word that I've been using for the last sort of 6 or 7 weeks, I guess, about alignment, out of balance. And the reason that she was totally out of balance is because there were no boundaries set, lack of boundaries. And that, I think, coming back sort of full circle into, well, what's the relevance of that in content? I actually think it has a huge, huge relevance in your content because you have to have vision, values, and I guess that sense of purpose, that sense of self quite nailed down in order to actually create what I consider to be meaningful content. And when I look at customers, I look at clients, when I see their stuff, often they're not anywhere near their content. It's quite vague. It doesn't reflect who they are. I can't see them in it. And that for me is a problem because what that says to me is that you haven't actually really nailed down who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how it works. So I've created some slides, and then if anyone's around, I'll pause and discuss. But who have we got? We've got Amy and Tower. Hey, how you doing? So hey, these are my core, right? It's like I completely forgot to send the email out, and you're here. Someone's here. That makes me feel good. It's always the start, right? So, right, let me dig out me slides and see what we've got. 1 second. Right, okay, present. I've been having some problems with my slide creation thingy recently, but Let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. Right. Share screen. Share. There we go. Excellent. So, why your content sucks and what to do about it. AI created slides. My God, he's got 3 arms. Wow. And that probably has no relevance to what I'm talking about at all. But I do kind of find it quite fun just creating these AI slide decks and just seeing what crap it comes up with. Anyway, so as I sort of said, it's this person, she cried on the call, right? Because I guess I act as a mirror. I often say to people, like, my role in all of this, things that I do, is a bit of a guide. I sit at the intersection between coaching and consultancy, and the consultancy is around helping to understand what's going on in the business. What levers we need to pull, what's not working, what is working, and we do more of what's working and fix what's not working. That's essentially, genius move, right? That's essentially what it is, what we do. And the coaching side of things is around helping ultimately to get through the mental blocks and the obstacles that often put in a way. And generally they're put in a way by ourselves, by us. So when I kind of looked through the content that was coming from this particular person, from this business, it actually almost reflected how she felt. It looked tired. It looked busy. It just didn't really reflect the person that I was talking to. And, that's common across the board, right? So I see the common sort of, the symptoms of uninspired content are, crickets, right? It doesn't engage with people because we've not spent the time to really understand who we're talking to, what we want to say to them, what actions we want them to take, what problems they have. The analysis is not been done. And again, I see this very, very often in businesses where started a business, loads of enthusiasm, loads of energy, and then, right, I've got to do some marketing. And it's just fire out some shit or sign up with a digital marketing agency who just, maybe do some of that. I mean, the good guys really do dig into your target client and help you, to understand the answers to those particular questions. The not so good ones just don't do it. They just create content and bang it out there. And guess what? It doesn't work, right? Because it doesn't connect emotionally. It doesn't engage with people. So you get crickets on the posts. You don't get DMs. And by the way, sliding into people's DMs, I think is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. If someone likes your post, they're showing interest, right? So drop them a DM. Hey, how you doing? Did you like the post? What did you like about it? They don't respond. They don't respond. But this should be part of your follow-up process. And especially in this market, you get lots and lots of support from peers, but not potential clients, because you're communicating to the wrong marketplace. And I see it's comfortable communicating to, your peers, right? You're the other, practitioners, the other business owners, they're giving you supportive and making all the right noises, but ultimately they're not your audience. That's not who you want to talk to, unless you're doing things like training. And then, yes, of course, that's appropriate. But really, you need to be talking to your ideal client, hitting them in the feels and helping them to realize what their problems are. Exactly what I did on that call today. I, highlighted in a bit of an honesty bomb. This is your problem. The question, do you want a hobby or do you want a business? That's a decision you have to make. So content around that aspect of things will resonate massively with people who have started a business and are not getting paid or not paying themselves. Your clients start costing you money. You haven't got a business, you've got a hobby. So again, as I'm talking about all of this, start thinking about what your own content is. Maybe bring up your own Instagram feed or wherever it is, your TikTok or wherever it is that you're creating content or trying to engage with your potential customers. Bring it up on your phone and have a look through. See if are you getting crickets on posts, and if that's the reason, why is that? Are they engaging? Is anybody engaging? just a caveat on this as well, and I know sort of bouncing around a little bit because I'm quite passionate about this subject, but there's a little bit of a caveat on that. Social media, I think, is a horrible, horrible place. So I'm talking about social media, but ultimately I'm thinking a little bit broader than that. Because emails can do exactly the same thing. Your email content. If your open rates are generally a bit low, but it's all relevant to that, what message you're putting out there. So the harsh truth. Yes, another one. No one start crying, please. It's enough for one day. The hard truth are, if people are ignoring you, I think it's not because you're bad at creating content. I think most people that I come across are actually, they're pretty good at it. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. We're not looking at Hollywood level, videos. We're not looking at, we're not winning Oscars. Photo with captions, a bit of a video behind the scenes, all that sort of stuff. All those sorts of things do work. But if you're not framing the problem that people have, then it's not going to resonate. People, I think, potential customers, everyone, you're running a business, right? Potential customers need to know that you understand the problem. Because when you do understand the problem and you demonstrate you understand the problem, you get an emotional response. And what's kind of, I suppose, unique about today is got really reinforced to me this morning, in a huge way, that when you create actively and frame the problem and direct it right at your target client in a way that just hits them, you get an emotional response. And I think content that is boring, and bear in mind, what I'm saying to you is, I don't think that my content is particularly spectacular as well. I've got to do some work on that. But what I do try and do is frame the problem. And also the energy. I think you need to reflect the energy that you have, the energy in your business, also in your content. Things can be very, very flat. Things can be very, very technical. Things can be confusing and, maybe soft, maybe apologetic, no boundaries. You've got to be very focused on one particular type of person, because if you're trying to be all things to all people, you become nothing to no one. So what's the energy like in your content? Is it energetic? Is it bouncy? And I know my wife, Amy, is on this at the moment. And if you go to her content, TikTok or Instagram, you go to do the twist, it's lots of color. There's lots of energy in it. And it absolutely reflects her brand. And I don't think it's not a coincidence that her social media following has grown organically quite quickly, and she engages very, very deeply with her clients. And if you look at the messages that she puts out there, she does connect, it connects emotionally with it. Admittedly, it's a retail offering as opposed to a service offering. So it's a little bit easier in that sense. But, because it's a kind of like, I like it, I don't like it kind of vibe. But if you're doing a service offering, you still got to get the same kind of connection. Is, am I right or am I wrong? And even those, if someone's people love disagreeing with people on the internet, go onto the internet to prove someone wrong. People love doing that sort of stuff. So if you can be challenging, you can be contrarian, but make sure it reflects the energy that you have. So there are a couple of pillars that we need to kind of look at. Excuse me. And pillar one is this process, this idea of clarity, right? And we want to be clear with people. So, and I think it's just nailing it down into three things, right? Is what's the problem, what's the solution, and what's the result? And if you think about your messaging, now, I always keep in my head the Money Supermarket advert. So those of you, maybe in the UK, think about Money Supermarket, which is, this is this person. And then before they discovered Money Supermarket, then they did this, and now they feel epic. And that is a really, really simple process. This was the problem. This is what we did. And now they feel epic. What was life before? What was life like before? What did we do? And what was the outcome for them?
And that's a really simple story arc that you can tell in any piece of content. And I think it's also a really good story arc if you're using if you want things for testimonials. Is if you can get a customer to do a video just saying, tell me what life was like before we met. Oh, I felt like this and it was like that. Okay, and then we did this, this, and this, and now I feel fantastic. That's a brilliant blueprint for a testimonial. And it's a really simple blueprint for content. So, thinking about those aspects of it and just keeping it clear, clean, and consistent, and having some fun with it makes life a little bit easier. Second one, the word cringe comes up quite a lot, especially when business owners don't particularly like creating content or it feels a bit cringe. You got to get over that, unfortunately, because that's essentially just your sense of confidence having to be transmitted through the screen. I think that it's at its core, it's all about basically communicating one message to one human being through the medium of digital media or whatever it is you want to call it, an email or a social media post or something like that. It's just trying to pin it down to one person, which is why it's important to have this real clear picture of who your target client is. And even if you just create in like one name, just pull a name and almost communicate like you're talking to that particular person, and lead them. Again, this whole process around leadership, alignment, we've got to lead our customers through the journey. So your expertise, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about. You're very, very clear and passionate about what it is you do. So allow that to come through. We don't discount our worth. We don't go into value. We go into outcome, and our messaging, as we sort of saying beforehand. If you're not sold on your offer, if you don't believe that what you are going to be doing will work, then why should someone else? And this is where I see sometimes when content's a little bit vague or doesn't have a call to action, it's generally because this part here, this bottom bit, we're not sold on our offer. We're not sure that it's going to work, And a great way to find out if things are going to work is you test it. Talk to your existing customers. What's the problem that they're facing? What's keeping them awake at night? What goals do they have? If you've ever worked with me for any period of time, you'll have heard me say this over and over again and ask these questions over and over again. Who's your ideal client? What's the problem that they have? And I mean, not, a superficial problem. What's keeping them awake at night? What do they really aspire to achieve? And what's stopping them from doing those things, and how can you help them? And if you just wrote a list of those, think of who your ideal client is, write a list of 10 things that keep them awake at night, 10 things that they absolutely aspire to achieve, 10 things that are stopping them from doing these things, and 10 ways that you can help them. You have got 40 content topics that are directly related to your target market. And you could talk about one of those every day or every week, and you've got a year's worth of content that's directly relevant to your customer. So I don't buy the I don't know what to talk about. It's not that. It's not I don't know what to talk about. It just means you don't understand your customers enough. Connection over credentials. Show your face. The number of social media feeds and websites, and especially in the medical aesthetics market, where people hide behind their brand, hide behind a logo. It's costing money, right? Because people buy from people. People want to see the human being that is going to be helping them achieve that goal, person who's going to be helping them solve that problem. Yes, of course, they want to know and understand how, but really more importantly is they want to see the who. And it does, I do a lot of work with people to really try and help them to step in front of the brand, because ultimately the brand is you. Most people's businesses aren't big enough to be able to have a brand that stands on its own. So the face has to be there. And again, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, You go onto your Instagram and you've looked at that, and your Instagram picture, the little round bit in the top corner is a logo. Think about changing that to your face, because it immediately connects with someone. Pin a post to the feed, which is you and your story, even a little carousel, just telling people about your background, what you do, who you are, how many pets you got. Just let them see who you are. Share some stories, share some behind the scenes stuff. Statistics are great, and I think one thing I do see a lot with medical professionals is it's the love of data, the love of statistics, the love of fact, the love of evidence. I saw this so much when I was working with Botox, that the language that was used to clients was very, very technical. It's a botulinum toxin type A. It prevents the transmission of acetylcholine across the motor end plate. Yeah, great. Cleaves SNAP25 protein. So I had to dig into my memory banks a little bit to remember that sort of stuff. But yeah, great. That's great. But what relevance does it have to the actual client? Do they understand it? Of course they don't. So you have to make that real. In analogies and things like that work really, really well. So yes, statistics are important, but they have to be balanced with analogies, stories, things like that. A story that I help when I get people talking about skincare, for example, is actually we're going to play a little game, see who's listening, right? So in the chat, I want you to take your mind back to 18-year-old you, and what was the fragrance, the perfume, or the aftershave that you would put on before you were going out? What was the aftershave that you put on? Because this relates to how I get people to understand about changing skincare brands, right? So have a pop in the chat. I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I want you to pop into the chat what perfume or fragrance that you used as an 18-year-old. Okay, and the last part on this one is be present. Imperfections. I love imperfections. Get it wrong, mess it up. Don't be polished. Just prolific beats perfect. Hugely in content. Don't overthink it. Don't overdo it. This is why I quite like live, because live is just imperfect and unpolished. But it's also, for me, it's the highest form of content. If you can get comfortable with doing live broadcasting, live streaming, it does make your life a lot easier. One thing that really improved when I started doing, so I've been doing live stuff. I took a bit of a break, but I've been doing live since probably 2018. And one thing that massively improved over that time was my ability to present to a live audience in person, because I don't need slides. I use slides as a reference point, but I don't talk. I don't read them. Look at these. It's got less than 10, 20 words on it. It's probably more than I would normally put in. A lot of the time I just use pictures. So don't overthink it. If you can do live, even better, because live really, really works and really, really resonates. So I'm going to pause there and just have a look and see who's listening. What is the fragrance that you used? And I'll have to read back. So, Amy, I've said that to you before. Hobby or business? Yep. TikTok is more cricket since I qualified for monetization. It's getting loads of views. Then much quieter. Facebook's doing well for you. And it looks like it's just you and me, love. Looks like it's just you and me. NA. Well, I was a Fahrenheit guy. I know. I think that's how you spell it. I was a Fahrenheit guy. So anyway, the relevance to this point, right, is, and again, if you're watching on catch up, jump in the chat, share it, right? Is what fragrance do you wear now? So when I get it out of my son's hands, I use Paco Rabanne Invictus. What is the fragrance that you use now? Stick it in the chat. All right, I use Paco Rabanne Invictus. And the reason that's relevant to the skincare story is it makes it real. So if you're saying to someone, listen, you don't even use the same perfume or aftershave that you did then. Why? Because you've changed. You've changed. your desires change, your needs change, the way you are has changed. Perfect. Why would your skincare be any different? And all of a sudden, there's a light bulb that just goes off, and suddenly it's real, and it's, the stories do the job. So, feel free to take that and use it, because those little stories and coming up with your own little stories make the whole thing just much more real, much more real, much more personal, and you'll get these little aha moments that go off in people's heads, and that's really what you want. When you get those aha moments going off, it just makes life a lot easier. Right, let's go back into the slides. So we've got our three pillars, okay? So we've gone back pillars. So pillar one, we need clarity over complication. We need conviction over cringe. And we need connection over credentials, right? So we know these sort of three things. So digging into a little bit of the detail, and this has been a little bit of a homework for you. And I want you to do this is a little bit of an audit for you. What does your brand feel like? In that word brand is sometimes can be quite misleading, because you think, oh, I'm not a brand. You are a brand, right? So do a bit of an audit. Go onto the social media platform or marketing platforms, whatever it is, whether people come into it. How do they feel when they discover you? And again, you can always ask your existing clients, your ideal clients, these questions. How do people feel when they discover you? Do they feel how you want them to feel? Do they feel empowered, positive? Do they feel, a little bit flat? Is it confusing? How do they feel when they discover you? Feedback I often get sometimes when I speak to my clients about it is actually that word is sometimes a little bit confused, because I have a kind of a bit of an agile brain, I call it. Magpie, easy distracted, others would call it. But I tend to bounce from thing to thing quite quickly. So often that can leave people a bit of confusion. So I'm trying to be very focused on that. So when people land, that there's clarity, that they understand who I am, what I do, and how I can help them. Leadership energy. Do they see you being a leader? And that means, you having opinions, making statements, whether they agree with it or not, but that's leadership energy. And I think for me, I think they would definitely see that leadership energy. Emotional response. How do they feel after engaging with you? Or how do you want them to feel? So if you've not done this before, think about, how do you want them to feel after engaging with you? I want people to feel inspired, illuminated, make them, thinking slightly differently, going away with questions, how, interrogating things, not looking at things at face value, making changes in, empowered, inspired, all those big positive words. That's how I want people to feel. So if I want people to feel like that, then guess what? I've got to make content that helps them to feel like that. And alignment. Does your feed match that energy? So as I sort of said, I want someone to feel clear about what it is I do. Yes, I want them to see that I am a leader in my space. I want them to feel empowered and energetic and engaged and, challenged, definitely challenged. And does my content match that energy? I think, it does. I think it can be a little bit mishmash. If I was looking at my Instagram objectively through this lens, probably, I could probably do with a little bit more coherence around what it is I do, rather than just vans and bikes and stuff. But that's part of what I love. So, I'm showing a lot behind the scenes, thinking about this and looking at this objectively. Probably could do with flipping back towards the business side of things a little bit more. So, that's what this works, right? So the shifts, and just going back to, the conversation I had this morning, is these are the three things that I kind of said to this person in order to help them not feel, to change the way that they were feeling about the business and the way they're feeling about themselves. And you can, again, why this relates into the content is because the way that you communicate your content, I actually think, sets these out in advance to your ideal customer. The boundaries, this is, I get great results with people who are creative, committed. Absolutely I need creative, committed people, and I need people who are willing to be challenged. So when I'm talking about content, it's like, that's who I'm trying to reach out to. Are you creative? And creativity sometimes gets lost because people feel overwhelmed. And if you're overwhelmed, it's difficult for you to put yourself in your mind into a different place to be able to have that sort of creative empire building thoughts. If you're putting out fires, it's difficult to focus on those sorts of things. So again, elements of content I talk about is like you're feeling overwhelmed. It stops you from being creative. I work really well with creative people because I believe everybody has creativity. It's just either never been allowed or encouraged to grow, or it's just being stifled by the day-to-day shit. And if that's the case, then we want to clear the day-to-day shit so that creativity can blossom, or we want to nurture it and stimulate it with questions, challenges, and help that, come to the forefront. So that's just an example. What people, creative people, committed. You have to be committed. This is business or a hobby. Challenge. Is it business? If it's a business, great, I can work with you. It's a hobby, great. Good luck, but you ain't for me. So those boundaries, me putting that out there. This is who I work with. This is who I can't work with. Make it really, really clear. Okay. So you can do exactly the same thing. Think, who do you work with? Who do you get the best results with? Reach out to them, talk to them, do it through your content. Pricing clarity. So, the discount Tourette's feeds into, it's a cracking term. I think it was Catherine Bell, dentist, who gave me that term. But, the discounting culture, people, some people don't ask for a discount and they get it. If you're strong in your leadership position, you won't get asked for discounts. If you're positioning yourself as an authority, you won't get asked for discounts. When you are slightly vague and uncommitted, that's where people, will seek for discounts. But also, if you're just communicating in a way that sounds cheap, obviously the best way to get cheap clients is to be cheap. So, because that's the message you're putting out there, right? If you're talking about value for money, and all these great things, then that's what you'll attract. And last thing, presence, right? Showing up fully as your authentic self. Now, that I've heard that many, many times when people talk about their authentic self. And I think that's actually quite challenging, because the first thing you've got to work out is actually who you are. And I've been on a crazy journey over the last couple of years to work that one out, because I've actually evolved as a business owner, as a human being, as a man, quite a lot over the last couple of years, some through circumstance and some through design. But that evolution has to play out in the content. And I'm maybe quite unique in the sense that I don't mind sharing what's happening in my life. A lot of people, can be quite guarded, and that's okay. It's entirely up to you. I'm quite open about it, because I don't really know any other way to communicate. That's just the way that I am. And I think though showing the vulnerability actually creates a bit of trust. That's what I've been told. I absolutely believe that. Showing some vulnerability actually creates trust, because it's just showing I'm a human being, same as everybody else. And I have no apologies for that. If people want to judge me negatively because of the things that have happened to me, or the way I've reacted to certain things, then that's entirely up to them. That's just the way I've done. That's the way I've dealt with it. And I have no apologies for that. The people who judge negatively around that, guess what? I don't want them anyway. So don't be shy. Speak your truth. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned over the last couple of years. Speak your truth. People might not want to hear it, but you know what? There's 50% of the people out there who do want to hear it, will connect with it, and will lean into you as a result of that. So content is your front door. This is AI invented statistics. So I have no idea whether these are true or not, but let's just assume that they are. In fact, no, let's interrogate them, right? So your content is your front door. 5 seconds. Time for visitors to form an impression of your brand. I think that's probably accurate. What do you guys think? 5 seconds? I think that's probably accurate. 5 seconds to work out whether you're a twat or not. Probably right. Yeah, Yeah, definitely. That's great. 67% conversion rate when your content aligns with your true brand energy. Yeah, no reason to disbelieve that, I guess. Looks all right. And 3 times engagement when your audience feels your authentic presence. I actually think it would be higher than that. I don't think it'd be 3 times engagement. I think it'd be much higher than that. But AI's invented these statistics. But I think, the reality of it is yes, people do form an opinion, an impression of your brand very, very quickly. So you really want to be taking control of that. So what impression do you want them to have? Take control of it, own it, lead them. I am this. I do this for these people by doing this. Pow. Align the content with your energy. And I think that's a really, really important thing to do. And when I look at, the title of this talk, why your content is boring, I actually think that it's probably because, or ineffective is probably a less clickbaity way of doing it, but because your content doesn't align with your energy. And that's what I see a lot of, that it just doesn't connect up. The content I see and the person I speak to, I'm like, wow, you're very different to what I expected. That's not what I expected. And I'll give you a great example of this. Actually, there's a business called Vamped, run by a lady called Emily. And when I first met Emily, her business, I expected to find sort of middle-aged woman running the business, and what I saw, basically she was a goth, and totally changed her branding. There was more leopard skin, there was much more edgy and engaging, and and guess what, the business grew as a result. So the audit, the fix, what we need to do is review your content, go back and have a look with fresh eyes, and to say, does this really reflect what I want people to feel when they land in my world? Does it lack clarity? Does it lack conviction? Does it lack connection? Does it align with your energy? It's a really big point. Are you aligned with it? Does it actually reflect? If someone kind of sees your content and then met you in real life, would they actually go, yeah, I get it now? And I think a lot of the time that's not the case. And if you haven't joined the Skool group, jump into it. I shall pop the link in the chat, and jump into the Aligned Aesthetic Skool group. So, quick fire tonight. I shall stop and jump into any questions, thoughts, questions, points. Do people agree? Do people not agree? And see where we're at. So let's try. Parfetti Penhalgalion. Is that that's obviously the fragrance that you wear right now. The fragrance that you wear right now. So so I hope that was useful for you. And yeah, my core message from today really is just make it align with your energy. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. Is look at what you're doing. Does it create the impression that you want? Does it align with the energy? And if it doesn't, all you got to do is tweak it. And I've just told you how. If you're not entirely sure what to do or how to work with it, drop me a call, drop me a holler. Give me a holler, and I'll see if I can see what I can do to help. So next week, I'll remember what it was I'm talking about next week. I think next week is I'm talking about see, this is unpolished. Next week, I'm talking about sales. And next week, I'm going to remember to actually send an email out to everybody going, hey, I'm going live. Because next week, we can talk about sales. Again, one of the big things that came from today is leaving money on the table. The fear of sales, the fear of asking for money, all these different things. We're going to dig into that next week. I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into that. Because, you got to have the money conversation. And there are a few little techniques that you can do to make it a little bit easier, so you don't get that kind of bolt of fear around it. because it's not a filthy conversation. It's just actually, I think it's quite a respectful conversation because you have a value that you and your client has a problem. And somewhere in between the two of those, it has to balance. So they've got a problem that you can solve. You know you can solve it because you're brilliant at what you do. And it's just connecting those two things. And that happens through a conversation. So thanks very much for tonight. Thank you for joining. I hope that was useful for you. Any questions or anything like that, feel free to pop it into the chat. And also, another thing is, do you know what? Share this. If you're finding this useful, it'd be awesome if you maybe would, take the link of this, share it with some people. Maybe they'll find it useful as well, because a rising tide lifts all boats. Take it easy. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you next Thursday. Take care. Bye now.